Tom Verducci, MLB Network, Fox Sports analyst, and he'll be on the call with Bob Costas. Braves and the Phillies on MLB Network. That'll be coming up tonight. How about that? Are the White Sox supposed to list the official attendance on their box score, Tom?
Of course they are. I do think they get a pass in this case. It was a doubleheader. I think they picked up a suspended game.
Okay.
So that may have been the explanation, but it shouldn't have taken long to count whoever was there.
All right, what's tougher that 3 years ago, I think the White Sox had, 93 wins, and now they're on a historical pace, to the Royals with 106 losses last year, to now threatening to be in first place in their division?
Yeah, I'm going with the Royals, Dan. I mean, this is amazing. 106 losses, 50 games under 500. And yeah, they could win the division. They're only 3 games behind New York for the best record and the number 1 seed in the American League. That's crazy, right?
Yeah.
So did we think they were going to be this good? No way. And I doubt even the Royals would tell you that. Did they think they'd be better? Of course, it's hard to be worse, but nobody saw this team coming to this extent.
But how do you we don't see a dramatic turnaround like this. Hasn't happened since the early 1900s, I think, with a turnaround like this. How do you, unless they really, really, really underachieved and then they're overachieving this year, but how do you explain a team losing 106 games to then, there's hope for the White Sox next year then, I guess?
Yeah, well, it's kind of the worst nightmare for those teams that like to tank, that just write off 3, 4, 5 years and say, we're not ready to win, so we're not going to spend money. They lost 106 and they went out and spent $100 million. They went and signed veteran pitchers like Seth Lugo and Michael Wacha and outfielder Hunter Renfroe. And they're like, you know what? We think we have a pretty good young core. We don't have enough, so let's add some high character guys, especially, Dan, getting pitchers who are giving them innings has been huge for them. You've got Seattle and Kansas City. They're the only 2 teams in baseball that I say are winning the war of attrition, because that's what pitching is, right? They have 4 starting pitchers who are qualified for ERA. That means they have enough innings, right? Basically, they've made every start, the same 4 guys throughout the season. That's a huge help. And the other thing is, they don't strike out, Dan. You look at this team, they're the best team in baseball with runners in scoring position. It's not an accident because they just put the ball in play. And we've gone through so many years recently with let's hit home runs. We don't care if we strike out. This is a team that does put a premium on putting the ball in play.
But I don't know why it's not a premium for everybody else to just I don't get it. That if I put
look
it
at
in
the teams that have strike out the fewest this year. You've got San Diego as number 1, right? And they went out and traded for a guy like Luis Ariz, who a lot of the stat heads don't really like because he's not really a high walk, high power guy. He just happens to get on base a lot with base hits. So that works well in their lineup. You've got Arizona, you've got Kansas City, you've got Cleveland, you've got Houston. These teams don't strike out, and they're fun to watch because of that. So, listen, they've also got Bobby Witt Jr., who's like superstar beyond superstar. We can't overlook that. I mean, you talk about going from one level to another. He went from really good to superstar overnight.
In the second half of the season, it's been unbelievable. I know Aaron Judge is going to be the MVP, but Bobby Witt Jr., I mean, it might be more impressive because of where he was to where he is, as opposed to we expected Judge, to be this kind of player.
Yeah, listen, we knew he was a good player, right? Number 1 pick, great, unbelievable speed. But I remember seeing him at the WBC for Team USA a couple of years ago. That dude was riding the bench. And he had a smile on his face the whole time. He's like, I'm hanging out with Mike Trout and Mookie Betts and all these guys. I'm sure he learned a lot from that experience, even though he didn't play a whole lot. And, you watch him play now, and I think he's the 2nd or 3rd fastest guy in baseball. He's a big dude. You see him up close. I mean, he's 6'3", 200. Absolutely can fly. I love watching that guy run a triple. I mean, he's just hitting for a high average now. Like a lot of people didn't think that was going to come this quickly for him. Yeah, I think Judge is likely the MVP, Dan. I don't think he's got it completely locked up. I mean, What if Kansas City continues to run the table in September and he has a huge month? I'm like a guy, when it comes to MVPs, I don't like identifying a guy. Then you feel like you have to stick with that guy, that horse that you picked in the race, right? And I do think September means a little bit more as long as you're in a race.
The entire sport of baseball, if you picked one MVP, would be who?
Wow. It's hard not to go with Shohei. I mean, he just internationally, his popularity is just incredible. But I think what Judge is doing is just remarkable. I would say that because we know, we talk about it all the time. That pitching velocity's up. There's more spin than ever. It's so hard to hit. It's the second worst year to hit in since the mound was lowered in '69. And you got this guy just going off, chasing 62, hitting well over 300, playing center field at 6'7", 6'8". So I think it's Judge. He wears the pinstripes. He wears them really well. If you watch him play every day, besides the highlights you see of the home runs, Dan, I'm sure you understand this. He's a baseball player, man. He runs the bases well, defends well. Just a very, very smart baseball player.
If I looked at Ohtani and I said I gave you an over-under of 25 starts next year as a pitcher for Ohtani, would you go over or under?
That's a good number. I was just thinking as soon as you mentioned that. I think it's a good number. I would probably go under, and I'll tell you why. We've seen a lot of guys come back from Tommy John surgery who really struggle. Look at Walker Buehler. He's still not back, and that was more than a year and a half ago. Now, Shohei will have more than a year, more than 15 months since the surgery. That works in his favor. But if you watch the Dodgers, the way they use load management with their pitchers, whether it's Glasnow, Yamamoto, Buehler, all these guys, even Kershaw in the last 4 or 5 years, they back off their starting pitchers. So I'm sure they'll go into plan next year with Shohei. Like, how do we get him to October so that he's starting game one of the postseason? And that could be as few as 20 starts. It certainly won't be pitching every fifth day, probably not even every sixth day. It might be every seventh day. So I can see them really being very, very careful, especially first half of the season with Shohei coming off the surgery.
But he didn't have Tommy John surgery, correct?
Well, yes and no. I mean, there was an internal brace procedure in there. Just put it this way: he had a second procedure done on the same elbow. Not everybody is getting the Tommy Johns. You're absolutely right. It's not the same exact surgery as the full blown, but they're going to be super careful.
Okay, but could Tommy John become obsolete? Like, are we, Aaron Rodgers' doctor with, his Achilles, and the same doctor who operated on Shohei, could it be what's his name, Elatash or something like, yeah, could it
Elatash,
be hit?
He's, I don't know, Dan. I think these things are progressing. I mean, when was Tommy John surgery? It was like 1974, 75, mid-70s, right? It's a long time ago. It's worked really well, but now they do have these new procedures where it's not as severe, so to speak, and guys are coming back a little bit quicker. But I think it's still the gold standard. If it also depends on how bad you blow out your elbow. I think if you really blow it out, you probably do need the Tommy John.
Yeah, because we could just call it the Ohtani surgery. I mean, give him credit. It's like Aaron Rodgers with the Achilles. I mean, he got back a lot faster than anybody thought he was going to.
Yeah, I don't know about you, but I'm always amazed by Shohei. I mean, I hope people don't take him for granted. I mean, this year is just incredible. He's got the possibility of 50-50. Last night, people are lined up at 5 a.m. for a 7 o'clock game for his bobblehead with his dog Decoy. And of course, Decoy does a perfect pitch for the first pitch of the game. I remember talking to Shohei in January when he came to New York and went to his hotel to see him and talk to him. And obviously the dog was just a puppy then. And he tells me his dog is bilingual. And I'm like, how is that? That's just perfect. That Shohei Ohtani, who does everything well, has a dog that's bilingual.
Who do you like for the World Series?
Well, my pick originally was Philly and Baltimore. I still like Philly. They're scuffling, there's no doubt. Right now, Trey Turner and Bryce Harper hit a little bit of a lull here, but I still like them in the postseason with that pitching staff. Suarez is back doing well. I'm not as sold anymore on Baltimore as I was, Dan. I didn't think they had a real good trade deadline. I thought they were one or two power arms away from being a World Series team. And what they did basically is they took on projects from other teams. Like Gregory Soto and Sir Anthony Dominguez couldn't pitch at the back end of the Philadelphia bullpen because they didn't throw enough strikes. They're like, oh, we'll take him on. Trevor Rogers in Miami was really scuffling. They're like, we'll take him on. We'll straighten him out. You need plug and play guys when it comes to trade deadline. You've got 2 months. There's no on-the-job training at that point. So I was disappointed because I love the team. They hit home runs. They're going to be dangerous. They play the game hard. They're athletic. I just think they're missing some power arms who throw strikes either in the rotation and the bullpen.
Could you see in 20 years from now we recognize Aaron Judge as the single-season home run champ?
Unofficially, yes. I don't see it officially. I think people look at it now. like, look at this. He's the fifth guy now to hit 50 home runs 3 seasons. So you've got McGuire, Sosa, and Alex Rodriguez. We kind of, to me anyway, pushed them off to the side because they had help in doing that.
Yeah.
If you talk about doing 53 times and doing it without question, authentically, you got Aaron Judge and you got Babe Ruth. That's it. And I don't think you need an asterisk. I just don't see baseball ever going down that road, Dan, to officially change the record book. But common sense tells you they're not all created the same, these records.
I also love the stolen bases back. I mean,
yeah.
Alex Rodriguez once told me, I said, why don't you steal bases anymore? And he says, they don't pay me to steal bases. I mean, Ellie De La Cruz, there's movement, there's excitement there, and I hope it continues because it's better for the game. It's weird. I'm watching the Little League World Series, and I'm going, that's how you play baseball. It's a bunt. It's moving a runner over. It's, just fundamentally, it was more aesthetically pleasing than a major league game was.
100% right. Dan, one of the great things about baseball I love is not so much the action. That's cool. But the anticipation of action. And so when now you have the possibility of a stolen base, you have the anticipation of action. And sometimes you get the action itself as well. So, Dan, you sound like a purist who loves the game of baseball played at a high level and with diversity. You must love the way the Milwaukee Brewers play baseball because they run like Pat Murphy. We know he coached in college, Arizona State, Notre Dame. Watching them is like watching a college team because they run all the time and they run into outs sometimes, but they are super aggressive. Quick story for you. Garrett Mitchell is one of their young players, gets on first base. And Tyler Glasnow has pitched for the Dodgers. He's slow to the plate. It's one-run game. There's 2 outs. It's an obvious run situation. And for some reason, he's not running. 1 pitch, 2 pitches, 3 pitches, 4. Murphy yells down to Freddie Freeman, the Dodgers first baseman. Freddie, tell him to run. And Freddie yells out to the infield, he's running. And he did run the next pitch, but Rhys Hoskins was the batter. He put it in play. But Freddie said that was the first time he ever had to relay signals for the opposing manager. That's the Brewers.
Have fun tonight with Bob Costas. Tom will be on the call. Braves at the Phillies on MLB Network at 7 Eastern. Thank you, Tom.
Yeah, thanks. Always a pleasure, Dad. Thanks.
Tom Verducci, MLB Network and Fox Sports analyst and reporter. Also works for Sports Illustrated.